Good morning. Okay.
Solway, Solway, how are you?
Solway, Solway, how are you? Time for music class, my friend. Solway, how
I've missed you. Now, if you can pick up on that, I'd like to try that legato. Legato. If you don't know what legato means, try and catch on.
Solway, Solway, how are you? Solway, Solway, how are you? Time for music class, my friend. Solway, how I've missed you.
And one more time, let's try it staccato now.
Solway, Solway, how are you? Solway, Solway, how are you? Time for music class, my friend. Solway, how I miss you. Okay, good morning again. I am very honored to be with you today. I am Julia Habrecht, headmaster at Emmanuel Lutheran School in Alexandria, Virginia, and my dear friend and colleague Marie Landskroener, our music teacher. We are hoping to have a great time and conversation with you today about music and how music can be lively and engaging. We, I think, can all agree that music is an essential part of our curriculum, part of our churches and schools. So we're not going to spend any time debating that question or idea, but embrace it. And we're going to share some of the elements of our music program, hoping that you will share some of yours as we go through today's presentation. So maybe just a show of hands, or feel free to call out music teachers. Okay, so we have some music teachers. I see we have some administrators, classroom teachers, just regular classroom teachers. Okay, majority maybe classroom teachers or parents. Wonderful. You've already then noted and probably believe something very important we certainly believe at Emmanuel, which is music needs to be part of the culture of the whole school. I recently was meeting with a parent and asking her what she thought about some ideas for parent coffees next year and what things she thought were on the mind of parents. And she shared, well, I think differently about some things than some of our parents. Theology and music, to me, are the most important things we do at our school, what this parent shared. And that warmed my heart, certainly. We all know what Luther said about the teaching of music, and it coming only second to the teaching of theology, but a way for us, certainly, to share the faith and to teach musical literacy. So this is a general overview of our music approach and kind of general objectives at Emmanuel. We're a junior K through 8th grade school, so keep in mind 4-year-olds through about age 13, like many of you have in your institutions. So we focus at Emmanuel certainly on the voice and singing, as a singing people, a singing church, but obviously also want to develop those skills in sight reading, playing music, theory, all of those things kind of rooted in our Lutheran hymnody and choral literature, not to the exclusion of other kinds of music, and we'll talk about that as we go, but certainly it's the core of our music program. We focus on both kind of group and individual opportunities as we're able within the classroom setting, and want to increase and introduce to students the idea that they are part of this tradition, they are part of sharing this tradition, and they have a responsibility towards passing this tradition, the church's song primarily, on to others. So that happens in a variety of ways as well. We are going to make some assumptions, and your schools may be in varying stages of curriculum mapping, course guides, scope and sequence work. You may have a very mature set of documents and set of principles that you're working with. And maybe I'll just ask, how many of you have kind of fully fleshed out scope and sequence and kind of course guides for your music program? Okay, so great. We'll spend a little time on this. This is helpful to know. So thinking big picture again, and I'll jump back and forth if it's helpful to show you some of these documents as we go. So preparing for this work at Emmanuel, in addition to our scope and sequence documents, and we'll take a look at that, we're working with 8 essential principles of classical education, and we're going to look at these in more depth, and I'll be happy to share this PowerPoint so that you have access to the slides. 7 laws of teaching. Many of you are likely familiar with John Milton Gregory and his 7 laws of teaching. We look at a kind of revised version that Jackie Veith has shared over the years. That's very helpful. And then in our context, we have a lesson planning template that we use so that every lesson or series of lessons, so in our case, often with music, that's a week's worth of lessons, include objectives, materials, procedures, how evaluation or assessment is taking place, and then are there any links? Are we using the internet for anything? This is something that our assistant headmaster, Catherine Kramer, some of you have maybe met her during this conference. She's evaluating teachers' lesson plans every week, primarily based on these elements. So there's certainly times when there's more robust content. Sometimes the materials look the same week after week, but that's not always the case. So these are some of our key documents. So these 8 essential principles, we're going to go through some of these pretty quickly, but hopefully as we show you some examples of what's happening in our music curriculum, you'll see or hear some of these principles coming to the forefront. Repetitio, we're repeating. This happens in music frequently, right? We're singing things or playing things or hearing things again and again. This happens in many of our studies. Embodied learning involving the 5 senses. Those of you who attended the church year session, we talked about that. Certainly music is an active, more active in some cases than what we think of in some studies. Songs, chants, and jingles, one of our 8 essential principles. So are we hearing songs, chants, and jingles not just in the lower grades, our grammar stage, but in the whole school? Wonder and curiosity, how are we cultivating a spirit of curiosity among our students? And again, contemplation, skole, what does it mean to dwell and rest with ideas, to talk about ideas, to enjoy? The 7 laws of teaching, again, many of you are likely familiar with these. Again, Dr. Veith restating these as rules. So this is about being prepared. Know the lesson, know your students, know the language of your students. Begin with what is known, and then add to that. Stimulate, again, the pupil's own mind to action. You saw some of this in the 8 essential principles as well. Require the pupil to reproduce in thought the lesson he's learning. This happens in music a lot, right? We're engaging students and they're speaking or singing or playing back to us what it is we are trying to teach. So the 7 laws. So all of this guides our work and our lesson planning and our course planning. We're going to share with you our full kind of course guide. We're going to take a look at some case studies in 2nd grade, in junior kindergarten, and in the upper school. So this is a document that we revise every year. In some cases, those are very minor modifications. Would encourage you and your school and your faculty to develop these across grades, across subjects. It's a big project. It takes a lot of time, but this is the roadmap for our teachers. This is a document we share at Back to School Night with parents. So all parents have a really clear sense of the course description, which is what you see up here on the board. Learning objectives. So what are we trying to accomplish? This is really important. And certainly with older students in our upper school, we share these course descriptions with them as well to provide a lot of clarity, give a sense of expectation. We also have how we're assessing. So what are the assessment tools we're using? So are we including written work in that assessment? Are we including participation? Again, in most cases, we're including all kinds of things, but it really illustrates that specifically. Again, in this document, you'll see other expectations. So when will students be singing in the divine service? What other opportunities are there for engagement in the music program, things like that. Again, classroom expectations, and a wide variety of other things helpful not only to guide the work of the teacher, but to share with parents what it is we're doing. So we're going to step into a second grade music class, and Miss Landskroener is going to take us through that. We have music classes at minimum twice a week for any particular grade. So our 5th through 8th graders have 2 50-minute music classes a week. 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade have music 3 times a week. Correct me if I misstate anything here. Junior kindergarten have music 5 days a week, and 1st grade 4 days a week. So we spend a lot of time in music class. We prioritize that. Our schools are different. We have to make tough choices about what it is we spend our time on, but we love that we're able to spend so much time in music. So I am going to turn things over to Miss Landskroener. She's going to talk you through. This is a week's worth of lesson plan. So
right.
Yeah,
so
jump on in.
Typically, each day of the week, it's typically a repetition of the day before. And with 2nd grade, you have music 3 days a week, which I understand, especially for some schools, is still a lot, especially with kindergarten, junior kindergarten, getting that 5 days a week. We do have that repetition, which really hones musical skills and really drives home the points that we're teaching them. So how we began the presentation today, the Solway song, I used that with junior kindergarten through 1st grade. And just sort of towards the end of the year, especially with 1st grade, who it's a challenge, they really enjoy singing it. Let's do it this way, legato or staccato or some sort of musical term. With the younger kids, and this includes 1st grade as well, they really enjoy pretending they are some sort of creature or person, and I'll let them pick, and I'll say, I want 2 people to tell me, how shall we sing Solway now? And they'll say, let's sing it like a ballerina, or let's sing it like a bear. And I really enjoy, it's just hilarious watching everyone.
Can you show us what it's like to sing like a bear? I'm curious.
You can probably imagine about it now, but it's so much. So I think one part.
I will check. If not, I'll be happy to
Or
email
like a
you.
piece of paper. I have no idea how you sing like a tree or a piece of paper, but somehow they did it. And I think not only does that stimulate sort of imagination, and that's something we value in classical schools as well, but it also gets them thinking of their different voices they can use. One of my favorites I really use to try and get them to sing out is pretend you're an opera singer. I know personally when I was younger, that's how I actually started using my head voice, because my mom sat me down and said, you cannot sing like where your brothers and your dad sing. You have to start using your head voice. And I just pretended I was an opera singer, and out came the head voice. So I used that with the kids, and they love standing there like, Solway, Solway, how are you? And it gets them really confident in singing out and singing loudly, but not yelling, or as I like to say, not using their outside voices. That's how, kind of how the younger kids start classes. With 2nd grade, we don't start with Solway, but we will start with the hymn of the week. We have a different hymn every week that we focus on, and we have chapel on Wednesday mornings, and that will be the hymn of the day in that chapel service. And so we typically try and learn the first stanza of that hymn. So we will start with that. Is this on the next?
Yeah, but
Oh,
okay, 607. 607, everyone.
Do you want me to read the questions first or just
And then do some questions
Okay.
with that. From depths of woe I cry to thee, in trial and tribulation. Bend down thy gracious ear to me, Lord, hear my supplication. If thou rememberest every sin, who then could heaven ever win, or stand before thy presence?
And I like to make sure that the students actually know what they're singing and understand what these words are. And sometimes with the very young kids, it's mostly we're sinners, Jesus came to save us. We're sometimes sad, we cry to Jesus for help. It's kind of as simple as that. With even first grade and second grade, and depending on the class, and some classes are different, you can really start getting more in depth with questions like these. Can you think of a time when you have been really sad, so sad that you think nothing can help? Or a time you felt guilty? What did you do? And then tell them a little bit about the hymn. So this hymn is based on a psalm. The person who wrote the psalm felt down in the depths, and you're using the vocabulary of the hymn. And they all of a sudden think, oh, that's what depths of woe means. I'm feeling down. I'm feeling sad in the depths. And then he felt that nothing could get better. The only thing he had left to do was to cry to God for help. But then when he cried to God, he thought, God knows every sin that I have done. This just makes me feel awful. I feel guilty. God knows everything. And then I try and probe the kids. But what did he forget? Are we really? We are guilty. But should this make us feel down in the depths of woe, and the depths of despair? And then bringing that back to, do we get to heaven by how good we are? And they understand this. They really, really do. Even the youngest kids think, no, we don't get to heaven by how good we are. We get to heaven because Jesus came for us and he died on the cross. And again, even the youngest kids really driving home that point, it all comes back to Jesus and his crucifixion and his resurrection again. And that is the main point of everything we're doing. So every hymn points to that, or should point to that. And then, of course, we address the church year. So why do we sing this during Lent? Why is this an important hymn for Lent? What do these words have to do specifically with the season of Lent? And then addressing the issue of Lent seems sad, but what is happening during Lent? Are we just stuck in the sad season of Lent? No, we are always looking forward to Easter. And we don't sing Alleluia during Lent, so we call it the Easter A word. So if we're ever practicing our Easter hymns during Lent, what's the Easter hymn that has Alleluia? Let's see. Jesus Christ is risen. Jesus Christ is risen today. Easter A word. And then they don't sing Alleluia, but they can still practice the hymn. And once you get to Easter, then they just transfer Alleluia. It's a pretty easy transfer.
Easter A word, I'm telling you. Try it out. It is one of the kids just love this idea of course, hiding away, putting away. Our youngest students literally bury or put away Alleluias that they create prior to Lent starting. And in our school, this may be very different in your setting or in your home, of course. Only about a quarter of our students are Lutheran. So we have a large number of students from kind of liturgical worshiping churches or churches that celebrate or use the church year. It's often those students that are embracing these things the most because, gosh, what richness they're now understanding and getting to participate in. So the Easter A word is a great way to help students. And again, can you imagine teaching a young child the Easter A word? You know, I mean, you can see their eyes getting big and they understand this idea of hiding something. Can you imagine asking a group of second graders, can you think of a time when you've been sad? I mean, the hands are up, right?
And they have questions like crazy too.
Yeah, right.
But wait, the most profound question is my favorite response is ask pastor.
Yeah, this is a good time for Ask Pastor Day, yes. But this is a very interactive. This is not just receiving. Of course, we believe that the teacher needs to be directing the class. We're not waiting for students to decide what it is they want to study in music or how it is they want to participate. We're leading and guiding them, but the idea is that it's very interactive. And you can imagine, we've sung an introductory song, we've sung probably 2 or 3 hymn verses, we've been sitting, we've been standing, which our students need. They need to move. So this is a very good thing for their bodies and, of course, for their souls and their minds. So again, this is all part of the lesson plan that Miss Landskroener is. We have a student management system where we document these things, but she's putting in all of these plans at the beginning of the week or prior to the week for review. So this is quite a lot of information, but you can see how this will guide the whole week very seamlessly when there's this much preparation. So do you want to maybe keep?
So number 2 up there, I do want to address that. Students review good singing technique, such as posture and vocal awareness, solfege practice. Good singing technique is important. A lot of kids get very excited, especially the younger ones. They think, I know this song, and they're singing matins. And we get to, I don't know. Or so for example, the last hymn of the week for our church year was Lord Thee I Love With All My Heart, which they had memorized, and the first and third stanzas. And we get to that, and they're just screaming, Lord Thee I love with all my heart. They are so excited to know this hymn, which is great. It's lovely, it's great to hear, but it's also so important that they know how to sing well. Because it is not beautiful when you're screaming out words. And there's a stanza of our hymn of the year from this past year, Jesus Christ is Treasure, and it was stanza 3. They love this one, Satan, I defy thee, death I now decry thee. They would cross their arms and go, Satan, I defy thee. But they would scream it. I'd be like, Satan does not like beautiful things. So when we sing beautifully, that is our way of defying Satan. And so then all of a sudden they're like, oh. We have another technique where we say, talking, 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 whisper, whisper, whisper. Outside, 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 singing, singing, singing. And that gets in their head the difference between a screaming outside voice and just simply a strong, forte singing voice. We're constantly addressing this, even though, of course, they know it. It's something that needs to be practiced over and over. And we do use solfege a lot, so most of them actually know at least do, re, mi, fa, so, and we use the hand symbols as well. So do, re, mi, fa, so, la, ti, do. And that's another one I'll say, sing like an opera singer, or I will go, watch me. And then they have to sing do, mi. But that I'll say, this is do, do, and I'll go. Oh, sorry. Can you sing it?
Do, mi, do.
There you go. Or this is do.
Do, re, mi.
Right, and then that gets in their head. Okay, these are. This is how we work within the musical scale, and this is how our voices work, and how the notes work within this system. Of the older kids, you can start going do, mi, so, and even going off of that, and they love that challenge.
Well, and one of the things that works nicely with that technique is we shouldn't be talking all of class. And sometimes when we stop talking, students pay closer attention because what are they missing? One of the things that when we're evaluating teachers and in classrooms, do we hear more of the teacher And again, this depends on your age and stage and what you're teaching. Or do we hear more of the students repeating back what they know, participating, being excited, being engaged? And there's a balance, of course. And again, depending on your age and stage and what you're teaching, or the particular lesson. This may be a lesson where the teacher's imparting a lot of information and there's not as much review, or there's not as much participation or sharing back what did I just hear and can I articulate that for myself. But do you notice sometimes if there's a lot of activity or a lot of talking, and all of a sudden, the person who's supposed to be leading discussion gets very quiet, and all of a sudden everybody leans in. So use these techniques. Think about these things.
And another one of my favorite things with that is a lot of times it's so tempting to sing along with them. Especially when it's like junior kindergarten and kindergarten, they're so close to the melody, but they're sort of off, and then they get softer and softer and go flatter and flatter, and you just want to jump in and sing with them to help them get through it. But the best thing you can do is just hands off, see how far you can make it. Don't step in until they're absolutely stopped and are just in complete chaos, which maybe won't always be the best option. But it's I've caught myself doing this a lot. I'm just singing along with them, and I realize I don't actually know if they know this hymn or not because I'm singing with them. And the best technique I have found is to ask the kids to evaluate their own singing. So you say, okay, sing, here's our first note, sing whatever hymn you're supposed to sing, and then they sing, and I say, I want you to listen to how you sing it. I think first grade was probably the best with this. I think just that age really, really got it. And they would listen to how they sang it, and I said, I want 3 people to tell me what we did well when we sang that. And then I want 3 people to tell me what are things we could do better next time. And I also noticed that when they were all of a sudden listening to themselves, not only did they sing it better, but even those kids who weren't engaged previously all of a sudden looked up and started singing because they knew that they could improve it. And they were having a say in how, almost like how it was taught.
You'll notice number 4 includes something that is called Comp of the Week and Relevant Musical Timeline Stanza. We're going to get to that in a few minutes, dig into that a little more deeply. And then you see what we had outlined at the beginning of these lesson plans, a note on evaluation. So the teacher during the course of that week is needing to note participation by body language, raising hands. And again, if there's any written work this week, there wouldn't have been. That would also be noted. But that has to be kept up with during the course of the lessons and the week. And then again, in this case, there is a link to one of the YouTube videos, and we were listening to some of those comps of the week as you came in. A big part of our music program, and likely yours, is singing either for chapel or for the divine service. This would be an example of a psalm that the second graders worked on when it was their week to help with chapel. They might have participated by singing a hymn verse and then serving as the cantor for the psalm. Mm-hmm. This is an example of a JK lesson. So these are 4 and 5-year-olds. You'll see the same setup here for these plans. Salve greeting, often in the lowest grades. Again, if you want an embodied and energetic and lively music program, especially with our youngest students, use sign language with the hymn of the week, your hymn of the year, your catechism hymns. Again, these are kind of core elements of our program, and so they'll be repeated. Hymns will be repeated year after year, and those hand motions are really going to aid in the memory, especially with the youngest students. You can see some of these questions again. A little bit more simple than with the second grade. Okay, within the Father's house, who is the Father, right? 4 and 5-year-olds, absolutely, this is a question they can help answer. Where is his house? Where is he now? Will we see him? Who else will be there? So these kinds of questions, whether it's in music class, whether it's in your science or mathematics class, your literature class, plan these out in advance, right? We want to make sure that we're really thoughtful about these questions. We have kind of our some of our theory here, some of our kind of core musical literacy elements, clapping, rhythms, again, so the lesson is varied as we go. And this is a 20-minute class. Okay, so with JK. So we're packing quite a lot in. This is an upper school. For us, that's 5th through 8th graders, although this is primarily 7th and 8th graders that participate in handbells. Despite this not being a choral-based class, they're doing the same things: the hymn of the week, hymn of the year, review of our comp of the week, things like that, in addition to engaging in ringing. Okay. Want to say anything about bells? Okay. I'm going to pause for any questions, comments. Okay. So that's a kind of look at our lesson planning and kind of the core instruction and kind of what that looks like. And we'll, at the end, take a look at some of those scope and sequence documents as well. Yep, come on in.
What's comp of the week?
Yep, we are going to talk about that. No, great question. So again, core pieces of our program that are JK through 8th grade. So all students are learning a hymn of the year and a hymn of the week, as Ms. Landskroener mentioned, and a comp of the week. The comp of the week is short for composition and composer. We have a music listening program, I have it listed on the last slide, that outlines composers and then coordinating compositions to help learn music history, again, improve listening skills. This is a great way. In our case, we do not have a very varied ability to teach other instruments. So we have handbells, hand chimes, recorders, but we currently don't have the capacity for something like strings or band. So this is a great way to introduce the orchestra, what other instruments
They love playing their
sound
favorite
like.
instruments
Oh,
while
yes.
they listen. So
Yeah.
violins in this piece, everyone.
Yeah.
Know your violin.
We're going to look a little bit more at that. These are some of, I've just listed, you'll have your own culture, but of course there are opportunities where students are helping lead in song. We're pretty careful not to call these performances, especially with parents. Students are participating in, we have 2 primary evening services. We'll talk a little bit about that. Classroom recital days. This is an opportunity for students who take private lessons, whether that's with our school or with other lesson teachers, to play for their classmates and teachers. This is a great thing to do maybe after a large program. We schedule these after our all-service programs when music teachers need a little bit of a mental break. So those days following that, we have these student recital days. Field trips and on-site demonstrations that promote music. We, of course, live in the DC area, so have access to a number of wonderful things. We have an opera program that comes to schools. We're able to attend performances in the city and engage with a lot of professional musicians. But be creative if you don't have those same outlets available to you. I also want to note this culture of music in the school is not just about the music teacher. Your faculty should be singing. Your classroom teachers, which many of you are, should be singing the hymn of the week and the hymn of the year in classrooms. Jingles and chants should be part of classroom routines as well. And then at Emmanuel, we have a formal after-school music program that Ms. Landskroener manages, so students can sign up for different lessons after school. So I've just listed some of our past hymns of the year. This is a big focus. This gives us clarity for the year, clarity of kind of instruction in theology and music. Again, it's incorporated into the life of the whole school, faculty, students, and the students memorize the whole hymn over the course of the year. And the stanzas, they learn, a few, 1.5 a quarter or something like that. But this is a great unifying opportunity among grades, among parents. We try to sing those at all school services, things like that. So here's our first grader. This was a classroom. We have in our lower school what we call 4 showcases a year. We found over time that we often said to parents, please come in, see what we're doing. But until you gave them a date and a time, they often just didn't do that. And so we now host 3 or 4 showcases, we call them, on a Friday morning, 8:30 to 9:30, a limited amount of time. Usually the first half hour is presentations like singing, chants, jingles, things students have memorized. So a bit of a performance, so to speak, sometimes a hands-on activity. For those of you who are doing things like history journals or portfolios that don't go home, it's a time for parents to look at those kinds of things. And then the second half is more of a traditional lesson, and parents are free to stay. But things like our hymns and chants and jingles are very popular to present on those showcase days. So our comp of the week, composer and composition, again, is school-wide. We use a music listening program, again, I mentioned, and then share that with teachers every week. That goes home in all the classroom newsletters. So we try to push this out, encourage families to look at those YouTube links at home, learn a little bit more about the composer. And visually, one of the things that has helped students in the past is seeing not only the comps of the week, but also our hymns of the week, which are cut off in this photo, literally on a history timeline. So we know especially young children have a hard time understanding the concept of time. So this is a hallway display where you see we start with early music, we go to the modern age, and then you see our hymns, and then this is our hymns. I said it the opposite way. Then we have comps of the week up here with composers, faces, and the composition that we're studying, and then you see that in time, which is a really great visual representation. We are going to sing some more. While we pass these out, actually, Hannah, could I have you help me? I'm going to play a little of this video to help students remember these musical eras. A few years ago, some of our students and music teacher created the musical timeline song. You too can do fun things like this. Follow along. That's the refrain. Are you sensing music that goes along with the words? Sing along. Timeline. It starts with the early age, then it's Renaissance, Baroque, and classical, romantic, and not to forget our modern name. Do you want to play a little bit more? Let's keep following along. Let's listen to Miss Landskroener.
Began 1600.
Baroque began since 1850. The wealthy played in their living rooms as men made more instruments nifty. There's George Frederick Handel, George Frederick Handel, Johann Sebastian Bach, George Philemon Telemann, Antonio Vivaldi, Antonio Vivaldi, you all know him, Autumn Song. At first this music raised a brow as much too complicated, but masterpiece more. Oh, this is the musical timeline. It starts with the early age, and it's Renaissance, Baroque, and classical, romantic, and not to forget our modern age. You get the idea. I would encourage you, I know many of you could play this at home or in your classroom. Please feel free to use that. This is one of our students' absolute favorite things to sing, whether in music class or not. This is a great way to remember and repeat. Remember those 8 pedagogical principles. We're repeating. Things are lively. Things are embodied. So keep this in mind. I'd encourage you, write your own songs, chants, jingles, whether they're related to your music class or not. As I mentioned, we have 2 large all-school services where, again, not performances, not pageants, not programs. This is evening prayer or vespers, where students are, fully participating in the whole liturgy and then leading in song, in particular, some of the responses, particular hymn verses. We typically have a theme hymn, something we often sing in Latin. This year, our Advent choral service included the theme hymn, Creator of the Stars of Night. That was sung in Latin and then in English. All ages, the littlest ones memorize that. Happy to share any of that with you if you're looking for ideas. Again, you can see the hand chimes here, so just a way to continue to introduce instruments, especially if you have limited resources.
And they're just randomly bringing the chords of the liturgy.
Right.
It's nothing difficult.
So we do a spring service as well. It's either during Lent or Easter. This past year, it was during Eastertide. Again, try to introduce some Latin text. You'll hear here hand chime. This is about 15 students. And then we have a clip here of our upper school handbell ringers. They're accompanying the psalm for that evening service. So again, we don't have to compromise on our, especially when we're thinking about these services, on our Lutheran liturgy, on our Lutheran heritage, but we can still be doing things that are engaging and lively and have full participation of our students. And of course, when parents see students fully participating, they engage in that as well. One thing we haven't even touched on are secular music, folk songs. We include all of those things certainly in our curriculum. We just didn't focus on those today.
Also,
Yes.
quickly, for the older students, we have these books called A Young Singer's Journey, an integrated approach to musical literacy. You can certainly come up and take a look at those if you're interested. They have 5 books, and we primarily use books 1 and books 2, and only 8th graders are in book 2 for now. And we're sort of thinking of ways to see if students can go on from just books 1 and 2, especially if they're knowledgeable. But with our older kids, we've only gone up through half of the book, so through page 20. But in book 1, it just starts you out very simply with here's the musical alphabet. It only goes through G and then it goes back to A. Here is the same musical alphabet on the keyboard. This is a staff. This is a line. This is a space. This is what it means for a note to be on a space. This is what it means for a note to be on a line. And it just works through there until you get to book 2, and you're doing things like keys and sharps and flats and more difficult rhythms. And they have a little listening component with them too that students can listen to check their answers, and it helps them to sing through some of the songs that are in there. They're labeling note values and figuring all that out. So these are really great resources.
Yeah, and that's this A Young Singer's Journey. This is our listening program, the Brummett Taylor Music Listening Program, again, that outlines those comps of the week. I would definitely note on these journey books too, especially if you are starting from scratch or you're a classroom teacher teaching music, this is a resource that's already set for you. And even if you were using this really just as a teacher resource and couldn't get these for all your students, these are a little bit pricey. These are about $15 a piece. But they would last potentially more than a year. So, thinking about resources. One of our other very lively parts of our music program is our recorders. I know that parents and teachers alike love the recorder and love when students start learning the recorder. One thing you may be doing, we use a set program where students receive belts, kind of like your karate belts or things like this, as they advance through the book. This is something they look forward to, so they have to come play something for Miss Landskroener with accuracy and mastery, and then they receive another belt on their recorder.
Just a little hairband and a ribbon or a piece of thread, and you got the black belt and the yellow belt.
This is a lot of fun. This is our author here for the recorder resources there. So we also use Leighton Music rhythm flashcards. We didn't bring those with us today, but those are great with younger students. They're a great visual, but you could certainly make things like that yourself. Okay, let's Wale.
Okay, so this is the opposite of solid. It's how we end class, but I always ask the students, who would like to tell me how we're going to sing our last song? What that means is I need somebody to tell me dynamic, somebody to tell me a tempo. Junior kindergartners through, well, I guess we only go through first grade, but junior kindergartners love this. Kindergartners love this, and they learn tempo and dynamics so well. So I would like 2 volunteers, somebody tell me tempo, somebody tell me dynamic. You can pick which one you would like to say. How are we going to sing this last song? Volunteers. Miss Lightheart.
I can't, the middle tempo,
Andante. Andante, just through your middle of the road tempo. Okay, I need a dynamic.
Mezzo piano.
Mezzo piano and andante. Are you ready?
Wale, Wale, that's the end. Wale to you, my dear friend. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Wipe and I'll still kiss you more. Wale, Wale, that's the end. Wale to you, my dear friend. Thank you all for coming. I have one more resource that you're free to take as you go. This was actually a resource. Many of you know Jan Muth, a wonderful music teacher in our classical Lutheran schools. This is a music in the trivium bibliography, so a bunch of great texts, everything from children's books more to teacher resources. You're free to take one of those. And then I'd also encourage, I know many of you are doing a church or school at prayer every week. This is another way to say to your families, our Learn by Heart, our Hymn of the Week, these are important things. We send this home every week. It could be modified in a variety of ways, but if you'd like to see an example of that, and if you'd like any of the scope and sequence documents or anything else like that, feel free to email or take my card and get in touch with me. Thank you so much for joining us.